Hey friends, Christy here with Little Roots Ranch, and today we're going to be talking about transplanting tomatoes. This is my cat Teach. Anywho, watch out, you can't go in there. Anyways, it is Sunday and it's at the end of May, and I am transplanting tomatoes into my greenhouse, which is a really huge greenhouse. It's unheated, but it's 30 by 50. And so my timing of transplanting into the greenhouse was probably not going to align with your timing if you're transplanting to outside, because you'll want to wait a little bit. But I wanted to take you along with my process, and we can all share in the comments our best tips or things that we use, because my setup may not be exactly like your setup. Last year I grew tomatoes exclusively outside of the greenhouse, and I transplanted in 2 blocks the first week of June, and then starting the second week of June. And my tomatoes last year were really fabulous. But I'm in the greenhouse this year again, and I'm expecting really fabulous tomatoes again. But okay, so let's get started. I did already talk about that I am planting into an unheated greenhouse that uses the sun to create a lot more warmth, and so that might be a little bit different, or depending of course on your microclimate. As far as tomatoes, this is a model tomato. I personally use soil blocks, but I use a blocking machine to kind of make these little blocks, and then they grow in there, and the roots are air pruned, so you can see them there. I think it's Elliot Coleman, or at least that I know of, came up with it, and I use his recipe, and I've been thrilled with the results. But it works the same whether you started in solo cups, or if you started in like a seed tray, or anything that you have growing. Now, I wanted to talk about size of tomatoes. For me, I find the most success in using younger tomato plants for several reasons. One, I don't have so much craziness with the tomatoes, but two, they're easier to transplant out, they're easier to harden off, they're easier to work with, and less chance for them to have things that bother them or whatever. Are you okay? My kitty cat sneezing. Are you okay? Thank you, boys. But anyways, if your tomatoes are a lot taller or bigger than mine, that's a-okay. I will show you the way to plant them sideways, which yields the same. Because at the end of the day, when we plant the tomatoes, as you can see, the tomatoes behind me, is you really want only about that much sticking up. And so that's about almost the size, like half the size of my hand or so. And so I'll show you how to do that. Also, I wanted to talk about soil amendments, because everybody's garden's different, and this is why I talked about sharing tips in the comments. Because for my transplanting in my particular garden, I'm fueled a lot by chicken coop clean out. And so all winter I layer in the greenhouse, or wherever I'm planting them, the mixture of chicken manure as well as shavings, pine shavings. And so for me, that provides a lot of the nutrients that I need to grow beautiful tomatoes. So I don't add any amendments besides eggshells, which I'll get to, calcium. And then also, as I mentioned, I do the soil blocking. And so the mixture for this includes, it has blood meal, azomite, which is a mineral. I love azomite, and rock phosphate, one other ingredient, green sand, I think, but it had in compost, natural soil, perlite, things like that. Not that the perlite adds anything, but all the other stuff help it grow. So that's kind of what I use. So now I'll show you how I transplant them. And the key for this is you want to get them deep, and which is, if they're smaller, it's easier to do. But if they're really long, then you get them deep and sideways, and I'll show you. So for the next one that I've been doing, also the trellising, it all varies. I use many different trellises. The ones directly behind me are for my determinants. These ones that are big, I use for my indeterminates, and the cattle panels you see back there, I use for my cherries. And then if I run out of trellis, then I just use whatever I can. But let me get a hole real quick. So this is my favorite shovel, which is my, spade shovel or whatever it is. I like it because it's just really excellent. And then I just kind of put a hole in the ground as big as I want. It doesn't really matter too much, but looks like I hit a root, so I will pull that out. Okay, I always keep, whenever I'm working in the garden, I keep a bucket to put like weeds or little seedlings that I don't want, or just anything available. And so I'll pull out all the dirt. Let me move so you can see me a little bit better. Okay, so there's the planting hole. And so I sort of get all the dirt out, and then I take my little tomato, okay? And so what I'm gonna wanna do is I'm gonna want to remove any of the branches that are going to be underground. And so what that looks like up close is, see these two? These were the first things that I would have seen on this plant. These are called cotyledons, and they're not the first real leaves. The second set are the first real leaves, if that makes sense. So these are the first fake leaves, and these come out from the seed. So all I'm gonna do, they're nice and small, I'm just gonna pinch with my nail, and I'll pinch the other one off as well. See how those were them? And I'll put that in my thing. But also I wanna plant this really deep, so you can pinch off both of these, but I think I only need to pinch off the one. Are you okay? Who's been sniffing something crazy? And so I just took that off. And so there's what I have, is really tall and skinny, right? Thank you, boys. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take, these are my eggshells, and they're really pretty and multicolored. And these have sat for a little bit over a year, well, about a year. And the longer you can have them sit, the better. And I'm just gonna take a handful and sprinkle them in the bottom of the planting hole. I'll also at the end put them on top, helps with slugs and all that stuff. And also, if they're really small, identifying where the tomato plants are. And then I'm just gonna take a little bit of dirt and crumble it on top, so that way the roots aren't sitting directly on the eggshells. And then I'm just gonna put the tomato into the hole, just like that. And then what I'm gonna do is make sure that the height looks really good. Looks like the soil, when it's done, will come to right here, only leaving the tip, which is a-okay. And then I'm gonna take soil and kind of crumble it around. Let's see here, pull that out. The soil at the bottom is more wet, and then the soil at the top is dry, because the greenhouse doesn't get rain, of course, like the rest of whatever. Okay, so then now that I've got the tomato in, for the most part, the hole is about 75% filled. I'm gonna take my hose, which is behind me. There we go. My little hose nozzle. And I'm gonna go ahead and give it a healthy amount. And I probably usually count like about 15 seconds or so. I'm not counting now. But basically, you'll see, or should see generally, a puddle, or it might soak right in if your soil is not as heavy, or depending on its water level. The greenhouse was not watered during the winter, of course. And so as that's soaking in, then I'm gonna go ahead and put in the rest of my soil. And so I just kind of grab that, make sure it's spread out. And once I get the rest of it in, I am gonna tamp it, but not in a hard way, because the delicate roots at the bottom, and especially if you're planting sideways, which is what I'll explain kind of later, or next, I mean. And then once I get it almost to the top, then I kind of just take the rest of everything and kind of put it around, and there's that gentle tamping or whatever. And then I'm gonna give it just another quick squirt here. Make sure, one that helps me to mark that it's been watered, and then also just to help, thank you, to help settle everything down. And the last step, which is the most important step, and don't be like how I used to be and say, I'm gonna get the trellis later, because the trellis will, the tomato plant will get big fast and all that. So I have my trellis right here. I'm just gonna put it directly over it. And oops, let me get out of the way. And voila. Let me turn you over to the side. Okay. Okay, so with trellis, oh, let's to the side. Oh, whatever. With trellising and getting all the tomatoes in, you might have, if you started your tomatoes, or yes, Teach, you might have a really long tomato plant. Now for that process, everything's exactly the same, except you're gonna take your tomato plant, so use, like, let's say this one, and instead of digging just a hole, you're actually gonna dig the hole, but also a trench. And you're going to literally lay it down. Obviously at the end, you'll curve it up. It'll look a little silly, and I understand that, but trust me, because one of the really cool things about tomato plant, and not all the plants have this, all the vegetables, but tomatoes do. And one of the coolest things is that any part of the tomato branch, stem, whatever, that comes in direct contact with the soil will grow roots. So currently, in this example, oh, my hand's about as dirty as the tomato, but in this example, I currently have this little 2x2 block worth of available roots or whatever. But if I bury it to like up here, then I get an additional 6 inches of roots that can grow out. And those are roots that can go look for nutrients, look for water, hold the tomato up, all of that stuff. So as much tomato as you can get underground, the better. And you'll even notice, like down at the bottom, you see how it's kind of like fuzzy or whatever, and it lessens as it goes up. That tomato is ready and wants to put out additional roots and grow big and beautiful and a great harvest and all that stuff. But anyway, so again, if you're and if you happen to have just a little tiny tomato, see if I have one. I don't. But like, for instance, if the tomato is smaller, like this one, the same thing. You still plant it deeper, but it just won't be as deep. But basically, you want uniform, just kind of the top, like few branches sticking out. If you have a really long tomato and you just put it in, it's gonna really struggle with, you know, one, it's a lot of plant that's exposed to the sunlight, especially if it wasn't like properly hardened off. But also you're gonna miss out on chances to have roots, and then the tomato is gonna have more shock because more of it is exposed. And that's actually another thing that I wanted to talk about, is that if when you're transplanting your tomatoes, you'll notice that sometimes they might give a little wilt. And matter of fact, I had one that literally absolutely laid down, and I thought it was fairly dramatic. But within a couple hours, he was already like starting to pick himself up. And today, I mean, I can't even tell which one he is anymore, but now he's perfectly fine. And so sometimes that does happen. Sometimes they droop just a little bit, and occasionally one will droop a lot. And they almost always recover. But yeah, anyways, so I guess the top tips about transplanting tomatoes is to, oh, you know what? I almost forgot one of them. Oh, hi, Teach. Say hi. Hi. One of the things that's most important is, if you're working with Mother Nature, so it's kind of hard sometimes, but if you can plan your transplanting to when it's an overcast day, and obviously if you're transplanting outside, that's harder because you want like a lighter rain overcast day or a no rain overcast day. That is going to be much better. What you really, really don't want to do is transplant in hot sun. you know, I know that that sounds like that would be the absolute best time, but it's really not, because your tomato plants are going through a lot of shock, and transplant shock is the word for that. But the roots are being disturbed. Its environment that it's been growing in is now different. The temperatures, especially if you've been growing inside, the temperature's consistent. Now there's swings and wind and sun and rain and all kind of slugs, yeah, turkeys, all kinds of things. But, and a lot of times some of the roots will break or whatnot. When it's hot, what your plant does is it breathes through its leaves and actually transpires a pretty good amount of water. But if it doesn't have the ability to pull in the water, then it's going to get stressed. And not only that, but bright sunny day, regardless of how well you have hardened off your plant, it's still a beating. The sun is really intense for a little plant. And hi, Teach. And so doing an overcast day, or where you'll have a couple overcast days in a row, is the sweet spot. As you can tell, well, the sun's coming out a little bit more today, but it was fairly overcast. But anyways, my kitty would like to say hello. Oh, thank you. Yes. But anyways, if you've made it this far, I really appreciate you watching. I hope you nothing but the best on your tomato transplants. And if you have certain amendments or soil things or just tips that you want to share in addition, so we can all learn from each other, please share those in the comments. And yeah, happy transplanting, happy gardening. Thanks for watching. Bye. Say bye, Teach. Bye. Thank you, turkeys.